Hello friends, Eli here with Mystic Circuits. Today we are going to be building a low pass filter. It can also be configured as a band pass or high pass filter. You might want to decide which one you'd like to build in the beginning. In my opinion, the low pass filter is the most useful. The band pass filter has a nice kind of smooth sound to it, but the clipping circuit is barely noticeable, and the high pass filter is sort of it sounds like a high pass, but it can technically pass a DC signal because of the clipping circuit. So in this case, I am going to be building a low pass filter, but I will show you how to do the other two. The kits are all the same. They come with all the parts you need to build all three of them. Let's get started, shall we? We're gonna go ahead and dump out all of the parts. By the way, this is the most complicated kit that that I have as far as the 0 HP modules go. It is, I would not start with it. I would start with one of the easier kits. It is a little bit on the complex side. There's a lot of parts. There's a couple things that can go wrong. So if you are new to soldering, I would start with another kit. I do have a link to the other kits. I would start with either a 0 HP attenuator, the I attenuator, or an OR gate. Those are all my easiest kits. But if you already have got a couple kits under your belt and you know what you're doing, then go ahead and follow these instructions. So you'll see this silver bag. We can kind of move it to the side. We have the faceplate that can go to the side as well, and then these jacks and these white standoffs can also go to the side. Oh, what are these doing here? Alright, so should be left with these. It looks like I put an extra capacitor in here, so I'm going to go ahead and move that to the side. Okay, so we have two values of resistors, and you can tell them apart because one is a single resistor that's labeled 10K, and the other four are unlabeled, but that's because they come in a group of four, so they should be able to be identified. They're the 1K resistors, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to solder in the 10K first because it's important to know where it is. What we're going to do is we're going to take the paper and the tape off, and we are going to zoom in a little bit. Take this resistor. My camera doesn't like to focus all the time. I'm going to take this resistor on one side and we're going to bend it over in like a U shape kind of thing. Right, so we've got this U-shaped resistor. You'll notice right here that this little location for the resistor is labeled 10K. There's a circle surrounding one of the dots with a line connecting two of the holes, rather, not dots, holes. So a circle surrounding one of the holes with a line connecting two of the holes. It says 10K right there. That's where we put this resistor. Right? We're going to put it in there, and we're going to bend the legs so that they avoid all of the other holes in the circuit board. And that's so that we don't accidentally get some solder somewhere that it doesn't belong. Now, if your iron has been sitting untouched for a second, it's always a good idea to tin the tip by just melting some solder on there. It helps wake the iron up and make sure it's nice and shiny and melty. And then what we do is we move this out of the way. We place the iron against the side of the joint that we want to solder to. You push some of the solder into the joint. Press the iron into the side of this other joint. You push the solder into the joint. Now sometimes with a joint like this, which is connected to ground, it can take a little bit extra to get the solder nice and melted right. So in this case, what we want to do is we kind of bend the legs up, and then you wiggle them a little bit, and you should be able to tell whether or not they are moving, like at this bottom portion of the joint where the solder is. If they're not moving, that means it's a good joint. We can go ahead and cut the legs off. Cut off that one. Cut off this one. There you go. So now, lay this guy down. This is what it should look like so far. As you can see, our 10K resistor is soldered in. Now you'll notice there's a couple of other positions that are labeled as resistors. 1K, 1K, 1K. Now you have 4 1K resistors, and that's because the fourth one is going to determine what kind of filter it is. Now I'm going to do that part last, so we're only going to take 3 of these resistors and go ahead and take your 4th resistor, put it to the side for a sec. So now I use the circuit board to focus the camera. Alright, we have our resistor. We'll go ahead and bend it over in a U shape like before. Alright. We're going to put it in the holes that are connected by the little line. Right, so like that. You can see there's a little white line connecting those 2 holes. That means a resistor goes there. And then we're going to bend the legs away from all the other holes to minimize accidental solder joints. I'm going to do it again. Doesn't really matter if the body of the resistor lines up with that big circle. Not a big deal. Now this, you can see it's kind of unavoidable that these legs are going to overlap with some of these holes surrounding it. It's pretty tight, and I'll show you what to do about that once we get to the stage where we're actually soldering things. So go ahead and do this. Alright, and now we bend that way over there. Bend, I don't know, bend it like this. It's not great, but it should be fine. I'm sorry if you're not seeing some of this. It's really hard to do while looking at a camera. Okay, so let's go ahead. First of all, we're going to solder these kind of easier resistors. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to tin this iron. I'm going to press the iron up to the joint. Hopefully the board won't move around too much, and then you press the solder into it. Gonna press the iron up to the joint, press the solder into it. Iron up to the joint, solder, iron up to the joint, solder. There we go. Now for this one, gotta be a little strategic. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna solder this leg first, because it's the furthest away from all the other holes, right? And just make sure the blob is nice and flat. And now, in order to solder that other leg, because this leg is soldered in, the resistor should be able to stay more or less stationary. So I'm just going to put that leg all the way up in the air, so it's not actually pointing towards any of those other connectors. I'm going to go ahead and just plop a little bit of solder on there. And now we should be in a good position to just kind of wiggle the legs around. Alright, looking good. I feel a sneeze coming on. Alright, so we've wiggled the legs. Oh, buddy. Alright. Excuse me. We've wiggled the legs and they all look fine. Now we're going to chop off the legs. That way my camera looks like it's about to die. Fantastic. So, cut these legs off. See if we can make it through the rest of this video before it does that. Alright, legs are gone. Cool. Let's see. Let's do the active components now. Or, wait a second. No. We have one more thing we should do before we get to that. So, you should be able to find this little ceramic capacitor in your kit. Focus. See what I have to do? Alright. Got this little orange dot. It's a ceramic capacitor. That's what this is called. And you'll notice here we have a little oblong labeled 10 nanofarads, 10 NF, and the oblong surrounds these two little holes. You're going to put the capacitor in right there. So right now your board should look like this. So far so good. What we're going to do is we're going to hold that still and bend these legs in different directions. And then, same as always, solder the legs, bend them up to make sure they look good, nothing's moving, and we chop the legs off like this. Alright, so far so good. Now let's open up that silver bag that we had earlier. We're going to open up the silver bag, take off the tape. You can just kind of like rip it along the middle. That'd be the easiest way to do it. This has a whole bunch of stuff in it. Go ahead and dump it all out. What you should see are two diodes, one little kind of, what you call it, like a foam brick with a white chip and an LED kind of sticking through it. Let's go ahead and take the LED out first. You'll notice the LED has two legs. One leg is shorter than the other. This is the short leg, this is the long leg. The short leg denotes the cathode. And that's important because in our circuit board, it very much matters which direction that LED is pointing. You see how there's a little minus sign right here on this circle? The circle is where the LED goes. The minus sign is where the cathode goes. If you do this wrong, your module will not work. So we can go ahead and put a hole in here. The short leg goes down in towards the minus sign. Right? So if you're able to read the circuit board, LED, short leg, going down towards the minus sign. Alright, I'm going to bend those legs. Oh gosh, this is going to be a tough one. I'm going to bend them like that for now, and we'll kind of fix it up later. Let's do all this diodes at the same time. So similarly with the LED, these diodes have a direction as well. And it might be a little tough to see on the camera, but in person it should be a lot easier to tell. There are these black lines on the piece of glass, the little glass orange cylinder that makes up the body of the diode. There's a black line, and it goes towards this red tape at the top of the diode. Red tape on one side, white tape on the other. Red tape, black line, cathode. Alright, and now if you look on the board, hey, look at that. The little white line where the diode goes, it says 1N4148, that's the diode. These little oblongs here, the white line. The white line is actually where the black line goes. You can't really print in black, or it doesn't look very good if you print in black on a circuit board, but basically there's also an arrow pointing towards that line. That's the direction you want the black line to go. So you can see black line, white line, lined up. That's how we want it. And, oh, this one's not as bad. We're going to bend them kind of like that. Black line, white line, line them up. Alright, go down here, maybe like this a little bit. That might be okay. Alright. Now, I'm going to tin the iron. Let's see how far we get. I'm going to solder this diode first. Solder this diode second. And as before, we can sort of solder one leg, and then this other leg that's close to all the other joints, I'm going to stick it up in the air and kind of bend it that way. Solder that. And then, let's see, what I'll do here is I'm going to solder this leg first, and then bend this one up in the air, solder that one second. Alright, that looks pretty good. As usual, bend the legs, make sure everything stays stationary. Looking good. We'll cut off the legs now. Alright, very cool. We're getting pretty close to the end here. Basically, what we want to do next is we're going to solder in this white chip called the optocoupler. And as usual, the chip has a little dot, and of course on the camera it is impossible to see. But if you look in person, you should be able to tell. There's this little dot right there. That is not going to show. It barely shows up. Oh, there we go. That little dot right there is pin 1. And on the circuit board, on this little white box, there's a little divot towards the top of the board where it says H11F1. That's the name of this chip. That is where pin 1 goes. So I go here, you kind of like pinch the pins a little bit. They usually come a little too wide. And you put it in the circuit board. You can see pin 1 goes towards the top of the board, towards the divot in the silk screen, which you can't see anymore, but you can see it says H11F1 up there. Pin 1 goes in that direction. Please do this the right way. Your board will not work if you do it the wrong way. If you're at all unsure about any of these, pause the video. Make sure everything looks the way it does right now, and only solder once you know that you're doing everything right. Alright, so what we do for this, we push our finger into the plastic case, and we're going to do the solder snake trick. So basically what you do is you take your spool of solder, and you kind of make like a little clothes hanger kind of shape out of it. I like to call it the solder snake because it's sticking up in the air. Now we're going to take our iron, and we still have our board. This allows us to use it with one hand. You almost hold it like a claw. I'm going to tin our iron really fast, and then you pick one corner, you put your iron on that corner, and you push the whole thing into the solder. Alright, you pick another corner, push the whole thing into the solder, make sure both sides look soldered well, and that you look at the chip, it's nice and flat. I'm not going to refocus that because I don't have the patience. But if you look at your board, before you solder the rest of the pins, just make sure that the white chip is laying nice and flat. Go ahead and solder these pins. Alright. Everything looks good. Let's solder the jacks next. Alright, so jacks have the hole where the cable goes in. Those are facing the outside of the board. Should really only fit in one way. If you've gotten this far, you can tell which direction the jacks go. Sorry I'm going a little fast. I'm just trying to finish this video before my camera runs out of batteries. I really don't want to splice it. Alright. Looks good. Now we're going to solder the flat tabs. What you do is you put your iron flat against the side of the tab that is flat, because it helps transfer heat more equally. Higher surface area means more heat transfer. Right? There you go. You don't need to solder these four. Those are for normalization, and there is no normalization in this design. So just solder the 8 that are going this direction. You can solder these if you want. There's literally no reason to. So we're at the last stage where you're going to decide which kind of filter this is. So you should have 2 of these red film capacitors and one 1K resistor. And you'll notice on here that the circuit board has 2 locations labeled A and B. If you want to build a low pass filter, you're going to put a resistor into A and a capacitor into B. If you want to build a bandpass filter, you're going to put a capacitor into both A and B. And if you want to build a high pass filter, you're going to put a capacitor into A and leave B unsoldered with nothing in it. Alright, so one more time. Low pass filter. Resistor in A, capacitor in B. Bandpass filter, capacitor in A, capacitor in B. High pass filter, capacitor in A. I'll go ahead and show you what these all look like, even though I will only be soldering the low pass filter. So this would be what the high pass filter looks like. This would be what the bandpass filter looks like. And this is what the low pass filter looks like, with a resistor in the A position. So now I'm going to go ahead, bend these legs. I guess I'll go like that, so the legs kind of look like this. I'm going to solder the capacitor first because it's harder to keep it still. I'm going to bend the legs out because they're short, little shorty. Solder this leg, solder this leg, solder this leg, solder this leg. Yeah, alright. Go ahead and move your legs around. I feel like I need to do that after making 4 of these videos. So now we're gonna go ahead and chop that off. Chop that off. Chop this off. Chop this off. Alright, now we're done with the soldering. Now we're going to put on the faceplate. So grab these little nylon standoffs. You can see one side has a little ridge on its nubbin, the other side has a smooth nubbin. Smooth nubbin goes into the circuit board. Smooth, ridged. Smooth nubbin. Got that smooth nubbin. Oh, I tried to put the ridge nubbin in. That won't fit. You gotta do the smooth nubbin. Got our smooth nubbins. You can see here, got all 4 ridged nubbins coming out. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take that, we're gonna take our faceplate. I like to make it legible, so look at it in a way where you can read it. Flip it 180, and then look at your circuit board the way that you can read it. Line up the 4 nubbins with the holes in the faceplate. Now this usually requires standing up, because it requires some kind of like gorilla strength. What you do, you put your thumbs on both pairs of jacks and you try and push evenly. If it's a little uneven, like if you're doing one corner more than the others, you could potentially break off a little piece of the acrylic. So just try and evenly distribute the weight. But yeah, this is a finished low pass filter. Hopefully that went smoothly for you. I know it's a little faster and a little more complicated than the other videos, but hey, I believe in you. I know you can do it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment on this video. Feel free to answer me or email me through my website, mysticcircuits.com. I'll also leave a link to the DIY thread for the 0 HP builds. The thread is on Muff Wiggler in the DIY section. Hopefully y'all are having a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.